Good morning. Thank you so much for coming in today. It is a pleasure to meet you. To get us started, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and what brings you to apply for this front desk administrative position?
Good morning and thank you for having me. I am very excited to be here. I recently graduated with my degree, and throughout my studies, I found that I really enjoy the organizational and interpersonal side of business operations. While I am a fresher in terms of full-time professional experience, I have spent a lot of time during my academic projects and internships focusing on how to manage a workspace efficiently. I have always been the person in group projects who organizes the schedule and handles the communication, so moving into a front desk role feels like a very natural fit for my skills. I am eager to apply my theoretical knowledge in a real-world environment and help a company maintain a professional and welcoming atmosphere.
That is a great start. Since this is your first major role after graduating, you will be the first point of contact for everyone who walks through our doors. Let us dive right into the basics. How do you properly greet a visitor who approaches the front desk?
I believe the first few seconds of an interaction set the tone for the entire visit. To properly greet a visitor, my first priority is to be physically and mentally present. If I am sitting, I would stand up if possible to show the visitor they have my full attention. I make sure to establish a bit of eye contact and offer a warm, professional smile. It is important to speak clearly and politely, using a friendly but professional tone. I would start with a simple, welcoming greeting like good morning or hello, and then immediately follow that with an offer of assistance, such as how may I help you today. By doing this, I am not just acknowledging their presence, but I am actively signaling that I am ready and willing to assist them with whatever they need.
I like that you mentioned standing up. It really does make a difference in how welcome a guest feels. Now we operate in a very global environment, so you will be meeting people from all over the world. When dealing with diverse cultural visitors, what adjustments do you make to ensure your communication is respectful and effective?
That is a very important point. When communicating with visitors from diverse cultural backgrounds, I focus on three key adjustments: active listening, adapting my communication style, and showing a general sense of cultural awareness. First, I practice active listening. This means I listen carefully to understand their specific needs and preferences without making any assumptions based on where they are from. I want to make sure I am hearing the words and the intent correctly.
And when you talk about adapting your style, what does that look like in a practical sense?
Well, it involves adjusting my tone, my pace, and my word choice to match the visitor's comfort level. For example, I recognize that some cultures prefer very direct, concise communication, while others value a more indirect, formal, or softer approach. If I notice a visitor is struggling with the language or seems overwhelmed, I will slow down my speaking pace and avoid using slang or complex idioms that might be confusing. Additionally, I stay mindful of cultural norms, such as avoiding certain gestures or topics that might be considered offensive in other parts of the world. Ultimately, my goal is to make every single visitor feel valued and understood while ensuring that the communication remains clear and professional.
That shows a lot of maturity for someone just starting their career. Now let us talk about the technical side of the job. Since you are new to the field, you will likely be receiving a lot of training. But let us flip the script for a moment. If you were asked to help train a new hire on the front desk procedures in the future, what key modules or concepts would you prioritize teaching them?
If I were in a position to train a new hire, I would want to prioritize modules that ensure the operation stays smooth and the guest experience remains high. First, I would focus heavily on communication skills. This would include professional phone etiquette, how to practice active listening, and how to maintain clear verbal and written communication. I think a lot of people take this for granted, but it is the foundation of the job.
That makes sense. What else would be on that list?
Next, I would cover customer service fundamentals. This means teaching them how to handle general inquiries, how to resolve complaints effectively, and the importance of maintaining a friendly demeanor even when things get stressful. Then I would move into the practical administrative tasks, such as managing appointments, handling the incoming and outgoing mail, and keeping documents organized.
And what about the risks? Any safety or security concerns you would teach?
Absolutely. I would place a huge emphasis on confidentiality and data security. In an administrative role, you often handle sensitive information, and it is critical that a new hire understands what can be shared and what must remain private. Finally, I would provide hands-on training for the specific software and tools the company uses, whether that is a booking system, a customer relationship management platform, or just the shared office calendar. I believe that combining the soft skills with the hard technical skills is the only way to make a new hire truly successful.
You have a very structured way of thinking. Let us put that to the test with a difficult scenario. Front desk work is not always smooth sailing. How do you handle managing expectations when a client's request simply cannot be fulfilled?
I think the key to those situations is a combination of clear communication, empathy, and the ability to offer alternatives. First, I would acknowledge the request and express a genuine understanding of their needs. I want the client to feel heard, so I would say something like, "I completely understand why you need this." Then I would explain why the request cannot be met in a straightforward and respectful way. I would avoid using technical jargon or making excuses, as that can make a client feel like they are being brushed off.
And if they are unhappy with that answer?
That is where the alternative comes in. Instead of just saying no, I would provide a reasonable alternative or a different solution that aligns with what is actually possible. I would assure the client that their satisfaction is still my priority and that I am doing my best to find a workaround. The goal is to maintain the trust between the client and the company, leaving the client feeling valued even if they didn't get exactly what they originally asked for.
Let us move over to written communication. A lot of the front desk work involves emails and letters. What techniques do you use to ensure that all outgoing communication is grammatically correct and professional?
I rely on a combination of manual proofreading, digital tools, and a personal checklist. First, I have a habit of reading my documents aloud. I find that when I read silently, my brain often fills in the gaps, but reading aloud helps me catch awkward phrasing, missing words, or errors in flow. After that, I use tools like Grammarly or the Microsoft Editor to catch any spelling or grammar mistakes that I might have missed.
Do you ever feel those tools make your writing sound too robotic?
I do, which is why the final step is the most important. I manually review the tone to ensure it sounds polite, human, and professional. I also double-check the critical details, such as the spelling of the recipient's name, the dates mentioned, and ensuring that any promised attachments are actually attached before I hit send. I think a small typo in a name can make a company look unprofessional, so I take that extra minute to be sure.
Speaking of professionalism, you mentioned in your application that you are comfortable with conflict resolution. Even without a long corporate history, you must have encountered disagreements. Can you describe a time you had to mediate a disagreement between people or departments, perhaps during your studies or an internship?
Yes, during my final year project, I worked in a group of 5 where 2 members had a complete disagreement over the direction of our research analysis. One wanted a very traditional, data-heavy approach, and the other wanted a more visual, modern presentation style. It reached a point where they stopped communicating, and the whole project stalled. I stepped in to mediate by first listening to both sides individually to understand their specific concerns without judgment.
How did you get them to actually talk to each other again?
I organized a short meeting and acted as a neutral party. I asked clarifying questions to help them see that their goals were actually the same, just their methods were different. I guided the conversation toward common ground, focusing on the facts of the assignment and our shared goal of getting a top grade. By keeping emotions in check and focusing on the requirements of the professor, I suggested a compromise. We would use the data-heavy analysis for the appendix and the formal report, but use the visual style for the actual presentation. Both felt their perspective was valued, and we were able to move forward.
That sounds like a very effective way to handle a stalemate. Now, looking at the role as a whole, what do you consider the most important quality for a successful front desk professional?
In my opinion, the most important quality is strong communication skills. I do not just mean the ability to talk, but the ability to listen carefully, speak clearly, and adapt your tone to suit the situation. A front desk professional is like a bridge between the outside world and the internal team. Good communication is what allows you to greet guests warmly, answer their questions accurately, and handle stressful problems calmly. It also ensures that coordination with other staff members is smooth. If the communication at the front desk fails, it creates a ripple effect of confusion throughout the whole office. That is why I believe it is the core skill for success in this role.
I'd agree, but sometimes the communication within the office is the problem. Imagine this, you receive conflicting information from two different internal departments regarding a guest's appointment. How do you proceed with the visitor or caller?
That sounds like a stressful situation, but the first step is to remain calm and professional so the visitor doesn't sense any internal chaos. I would acknowledge the discrepancy without taking sides or blaming a specific department. I would say something like, "I want to make sure I give you the most accurate information, so please give me just a moment to clarify this for you." This assures the visitor that I am taking ownership of the problem.
And how do you resolve the conflict behind the scenes?
I would quickly contact both departments to verify the correct information. If the two departments cannot agree or if the conflict persists, I would involve my supervisor or a manager to get a final decision. Once the accurate details are confirmed, I would return to the visitor or caller and communicate the resolution clearly. I want to make sure they feel informed and supported throughout the process, so they leave the interaction feeling that the company is competent and organized.
Let us talk about organization. Scheduling conflicts happen all the time. If you find yourself in the middle of a scheduling conflict, how do you manage the resolution?
First, I would gather all the available details. I need to know exactly what the conflicting appointments are, who the people involved are, and what the deadlines or priorities are. Once I have the full picture, I assess the flexibility of each commitment. I would look to see if one appointment can be moved by an hour, or if a meeting can be shifted to a different day without causing a major problem.
What if neither party is willing to move their time?
If rescheduling isn't an option, I would look for alternatives. This might mean delegating a task to another qualified team member or finding a compromise, like splitting the time between the two parties. Throughout this process, clear communication is the most important part. I would inform everyone affected by the change and explain the reasoning behind the decision so they feel the process was fair. The ultimate goal is to resolve the conflict efficiently while minimizing disruption and ensuring all parties are as satisfied as possible with the outcome.
Now imagine a slightly different version of that. What if you receive conflicting instructions from management regarding a new protocol? For example, one manager tells you to do X and another tells you to do Y. How do you seek clarification and move forward?
In that case, my first step would be to document the discrepancies clearly. I would write down exactly what each manager requested so I have a factual record. Then I would approach the relevant managers individually. I would frame it very politely, saying something like, "Manager A mentioned this protocol, but I also recall Manager B mentioning this other approach. I want to make sure I am following the correct procedure to be as efficient as possible. I want to understand the context behind their directives."
And if they still disagree after you ask?
If the conflict persists, I would suggest or schedule a brief joint meeting with all involved parties. It is much more efficient to align on priorities in a three-way conversation than to go back and forth via email. Once a consensus is reached, I would summarize the agreed-upon protocol in writing and share it with all stakeholders. That way, there is a written record that everyone has signed off on, and I can proceed with confidence knowing that I am meeting everyone's expectations.
That is a very professional way to handle a hierarchy issue. Let us shift gears to security. You mentioned confidentiality earlier. In your own words, what is confidentiality in an administrative context?
Confidentiality in an administrative context means the absolute commitment to keeping sensitive information private and secure. This isn't just about top-secret company files. It includes personal details of employees, private client contact information, or any documents that are not intended for public or unauthorized eyes. Practically, it means handling information with extreme care, storing digital and physical files safely, and only sharing data with those who have the explicit right and need to access it. I understand that breaking confidentiality can lead to severe trust issues, legal problems, or even actual harm to the individuals and the organization. It is a matter of ethics and professional integrity.
Very well put. Now let us get into the day-to-day grind. How do you organize incoming mail and packages?
I believe in a system of sorting by priority, recipient, and type. First, I would scan all incoming items for anything urgent, such as time-sensitive legal documents or perishable packages. Those get handled and delivered immediately. After the urgent items are cleared, I would sort the rest by department or individual recipient. I would make sure to log everything into a tracking system so there is a record of when a package arrived. Mail would be placed in designated slots or folders for each person, while larger packages would be stored securely in a designated area until they are collected. Finally, I would notify the recipients promptly via email or a quick message to ensure that nothing sits on the desk for too long.
We often have days where the phone is ringing, people are standing at the desk, and emails are piling up all at once. What systems or organizational methods do you use to stay calm, focused, and highly productive during a sustained period of high volume and stress?
To handle those high-pressure periods, I rely on a combination of structured systems and personal mental habits. First, I prioritize tasks using a tiered system. I categorize everything by urgency and importance, which helps me avoid that feeling of being overwhelmed by a giant list. I also break larger, more complex tasks into smaller, manageable steps so I can maintain momentum.
Do you use any specific tools for that?
Yes, I'm a big fan of time blocking. I try to allocate specific periods for focused work, like processing mail or updating records, and separate those from the time I spend on reactive tasks, like answering phones. I also use digital tools like shared calendars and project management software to keep track of deadlines. If the workload becomes truly unsustainable, I believe in regular check-ins with my team to see if we can distribute the work more evenly. And on a personal level, I practice brief mindfulness techniques. Just a few seconds of deep breathing or a very short walk to the water cooler can reset my focus and reduce stress, allowing me to return to the desk with a clear head.
That sounds like a very sustainable approach. Now let us talk about communication failures. What are some of the common pitfalls of office communication that you have been trained to avoid or that you are aware of?
I think one of the biggest pitfalls is a lack of clarity. When instructions are vague, it leads to misunderstandings and wasted time. Another major issue is poor listening, where people are simply waiting for their turn to speak rather than actually trying to understand the other person's point. I also think there is a modern pitfall regarding over-reliance on digital communication. When we rely only on emails or chat apps, the tone and intent can easily be lost, which often leads to unnecessary conflict.
How do you personally avoid those pitfalls?
I try to avoid those by always seeking a feedback loop. If I receive a vague instruction, I will paraphrase it back to the sender and ask, "Is this my understanding correct?" This ensures we are on the same page. I also believe in picking up the phone or walking over to a desk if I feel a digital conversation is becoming tense or confusing. I avoid assuming that everyone has the same context that I do, so I provide the necessary background information when I communicate. By being intentional and seeking clarification, I can avoid most of those common communication traps.
You have a very strong grasp of the fundamentals. I want to ask you about your growth. You are a fresher, but you have a degree. What advanced skills do you possess that would contribute to process improvement beyond basic administrative tasks?
While I am early in my career, I have developed skills in data analysis, workflow automation, and process mapping during my studies. I am not just looking to follow a process, I am interested in how to make that process better. I can identify inefficiencies by analyzing performance metrics. For example, if I notice that a certain type of inquiry always takes a long time to resolve, I can look for the bottleneck. I am also comfortable using tools like macros or workflow software to streamline repetitive tasks.
Can you give me an example of how you might apply that here?
Certainly, if I noticed that the process for onboarding new guests was manual and repetitive, I might suggest integrating a digital CRM or a project management system to automate the notifications and document collection. I also have experience in creating training materials, so I can help document new procedures to ensure long-term adoption. I want to be someone who not only manages the front desk, but also helps the company evolve its operations to be more efficient.
That is an ambitious mindset and we value that. However, let us talk about the flip side. Everyone makes mistakes. How do you handle a situation where you realize you were responsible for a costly error in scheduling or booking?
If I realized I had made a costly error, my first step would be to stay calm and assess the full extent of the situation. I believe the only way to handle a mistake is with complete transparency. I would acknowledge the error immediately without making excuses. I would go to my supervisor and the affected parties and say, I have made a mistake with this booking, and here is exactly what happened.
And then what? Just admitting it isn't always enough.
Exactly. Admitting it is only the first step. The second step is focusing entirely on the solution. I would present my supervisor with a few options for how to fix the error, or if I am unsure, I would ask for their guidance on the best way to resolve it. After the issue is fixed, I would perform a post-mortem analysis. I would ask myself why the mistake happened. Was it a lack of a double-check system? Was I rushed? Then I would update my own procedures, perhaps by adding a checklist or a calendar alert, to ensure that the same mistake never happens again.
Let us move to a more volatile situation. Imagine a difficult visitor is at your desk. They are trying to argue with you about a company policy. Perhaps they are unhappy with a security requirement or a waiting period. How do you de-escalate the situation without compromising professional boundaries?
The key in those moments is to remain a calm anchor while the other person is emotional. I would start by listening actively and acknowledging their frustration. I would use phrases like, I understand why this is frustrating for you, and I appreciate your patience. This validates their feelings without necessarily agreeing with their argument. Then I would use clear, neutral language to explain the policy, and more importantly, why the policy exists. I find that people are more accepting of a rule if they understand the purpose behind it.
What if they just keep shouting or refuse to accept the answer?
If they remain upset, I would maintain a steady, professional voice and avoid any defensive or confrontational tones. I would offer alternative solutions that are still within the bounds of the policy. For instance, if they cannot enter the building without an ID, I might offer to call their host to see if they can provide a temporary pass. I would keep the conversation focused on constructive outcomes. If the situation ever escalated to a point where it became unsafe or abusive, I would follow the company's security protocol, but until then, my goal is to validate their concerns while firmly upholding the guidelines.
I appreciate that answer. Now a quick check on the tools of the trade. Name 3 types of office equipment you are proficient in using.
I am proficient in using printers, scanners, and multi-line phone systems. I am comfortable troubleshooting basic printer issues, using scanners to convert physical documents into organized digital files, and managing multiple incoming and outgoing calls on a professional phone system to ensure no one is left on hold for too long.
Great. Let us go back to the agitated client. This is slightly different from the policy argument. This time, a client is highly agitated because they cannot get an immediate answer to a question, but the answer requires internal coordination from several departments. How do you de-escalate this?
This is a challenge of managing expectations. First, I would acknowledge the urgency and validate their concerns immediately. I would let them know that I understand why they need this answer right now. Then I would be honest about the process. I would explain that their request requires input from other team members to ensure the answer is 100% accurate.
That might make them even more frustrated that it is taking so long.
That is why I would provide a clear, realistic timeline. Instead of saying I will get back to you soon, I would say, I am going to contact the department head right now, and I will give you an update by 2 p.m. today. By giving a specific time, I am showing them that I have a plan. I would also offer to follow up with them personally, so they do not feel like they are being lost in the system. I would stay calm and avoid making promises I cannot keep. The goal is to replace their uncertainty with a concrete plan of action.
Last question for me. In a busy office, you often get hit with 10 small things at once. How do you handle multiple, simple tasks coming in at the same time?
I handle those by quickly prioritizing them based on urgency and importance. I take a few seconds to assess each task. For example, a phone call usually takes priority over a filing task, and a guest standing in front of me takes priority over an email. I also try to group similar tasks together to create a flow. If I have 3 different letters to mail, I do them all in one go rather than jumping back and forth. If the volume becomes truly overwhelming, I am not afraid to ask a teammate for a quick hand if they are free. Staying organized and keeping a steady pace helps me manage the rush without feeling overwhelmed.
Well, I have to say, for a fresher, you have a very impressive grasp of the administrative mindset. You've given very thorough and thoughtful answers. Do you have any questions for me about the role or the company?
Yes, I do. I was wondering, for someone in this position who is eager to grow, what does success look like in the first 6 months? And also, are there opportunities to eventually contribute to the process improvement projects I mentioned earlier?
Those are excellent questions. Success in the first 6 months is all about reliability and building trust with the staff and visitors. Once you have the basics mastered, we absolutely encourage our staff to suggest improvements. We love a proactive approach. We will be in touch by the end of the week regarding the next steps.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you as well. Have a great day.